My ex and I tried to break up but can't stop crying over each other. He said, I'm not ready for a relationship, while I insisted, we can try again when we're healed. Now with concert tickets for August, fate feels tangled. What's next for us? So I need assistance with how to approach this situation. As the title indicates, I am a 22-year-old female and my ex-partner is a 22-year-old male. We have recently broken up after 2.5 years, but the circumstances are much more complicated than they may seem, and they continue to be so. Warning, this will be lengthy. To provide some context, our relationship was toxic on both sides. He had only one relationship prior to dating me, and his ex-partner abused and manipulated him throughout their childhood, forcing him to date her for over 3 years until he finally mustered the courage to break up with her. She was already talking to someone else by the time he ended it, so she let him go. I have dated 5 people before him, most of whom were abusive and traumatizing, with one relationship escalating to the point of requiring a school-sanctioned restraining order. Yes, that is apparently a reality, and no, it did not help. We met at his workplace and began communicating only a month after he broke up with his ex, as he had completely moved on from her long before their breakup and started dating again shortly thereafter. During our good times, it was everything that everyone describes as an ideal relationship, as easy as breathing and as perfect as life can be. It truly felt like the true love and finding a soulmate that every book and movie portrays. However, I wouldn't be writing this if it were solely good times. I am sure some of you can discern the issues that arose from the context I provided. It began slowly. I would experience a panic attack. I have severe anxiety connected to my ex from whom I needed a restraining order, and he would start panicking because he didn't know how to assist me. His ex conditioned him to expect to be yelled at and given the cold shoulder if he did not help her correctly, so I felt the need to find a way to calm myself down to help calm him. However, I engage in pain-stimming behaviors, picking at the skin on my fingers and hands, stabbing my nails into my fingers and palms, lip biting and tearing. And one of the few methods I use to ground myself involves inflicting some form of physical harm on myself, which triggered him because his ex used self-harm as a method of control to make him stay with her. Consequently, he ended up feeling more upset, and I struggled to calm down from my panic attack because he was also in distress. This often led to me needing complete space from him, sometimes exiting his house in a rush, with him chasing after me to prevent me from leaving despite having to wake up in 4 hours. Most of our issues, while complicated in their own right, would often follow this pattern. Something would happen to me related to past traumas, he would attempt to help but be triggered by his own past experiences. And the situation would escalate because neither of us could self-regulate effectively and didn't know how to step back to calm ourselves, resulting in a significant issue without resolution. It reached a point where the negative aspects outweighed the positive, and we were unable to maintain our way of living. I suggested that we take a step back from our relationship by texting less and not spending every weekend together, but he refused, believing it would not be beneficial. The night after I proposed that, he broke up with me. This occurred at the end of February. This is where things become complicated. He did not break up with me in the traditional sense. When he sent me home from his house saying he could not continue our relationship in the way it had been going, he intended for it to be an indefinite no-contact break depending on my healing process. We defined our break as reconnecting in July for our anniversary, with the intention of starting anew, which would allow for a little over 4 months apart, just a couple of days after the initial breakup. At the onset of this break, we both believed I was the problem in the relationship, prompting me to find a therapist who has been incredibly helpful through all of this. A couple of weeks into the break, my therapist informed me that a 5-month break with no communication is, as I paraphrase, since she is a professional and I am not essentially insane as a concept, and is unlikely to work as he intends, given that 5 months is a significant duration for many things to occur. I decided to reach out to him to discuss this, as it needed to be addressed promptly, and it did not go as I had hoped. He admitted he is not ready for a relationship at the moment and does not know if he will be by July as we had planned, nor does he know what he wants presently. I inquired if he intended to inform me of this soon, but he did not provide a clear answer. I expressed that I still love him and that we should not be so certain during such uncertain times, suggesting we give it time. However, he remained adamant about dismissing July. After our call, he unfollowed me on social media and removed our anniversary date from his bio, which had been there the entire time. You can imagine I kept checking before going to play games with some mutual friends. Understandably, I took this as a breakup because there was no other way to interpret it, and I felt completely devoid of closure. My therapist advised me to write down my feelings as if it were a letter to him as a means of finding closure and expressing my emotions, as I have difficulty processing them properly. One letter turned into many, and I came to realize that I was not the sole reason for our relationship's problems. He was indeed correct about not being ready for a relationship. He had not been ready throughout our entire relationship. and many of my anxieties that deeply affected us and contributed to our persistent arguments could have been avoided if he had been prepared. When I would express discomfort regarding someone's interaction with him or a particular situation, it would lead to an argument because I was letting my trust issues overwhelm me and being unreasonable and controlling of his actions, which mirrored his ex's behavior. Or he would suggest I was preventing him from hanging out or gaming with friends because he felt guilty, never asking me despite my reassurances that it was entirely okay. There are other examples, and I will leave out specific context for the sake of anonymity, but those were the most significant and consistent issues that rendered our relationship toxic. I ultimately wrote one more letter intended for him, sharing my perspective on our relationship now that I have taken a step back, hoping he would recognize what I do and pursue therapy because he arguably needs it more than I do. I still requested a retry, as we previously agreed, and asked to maintain some connection, urging him not to hesitate to reach out for anything, even trivial matters, because I still love him dearly, so sue me. That was around mid-March, around the 16th, and a mutual friend, R, kindly agreed to deliver the letter to P for me so I didn't have to see him. I relinquished that letter as my means of closure, and although I requested a response to understand his perspective side as well, I held no expectations, especially since R mentioned that P seemed to complain about my writing to him. R handed me P's letter the Tuesday after, March 24th, but it was dated. P is meticulous in that way for the 19th, as he needed time before he was ready to hand it over a couple of days prior to when R provided it to me during our hangout on the 24th. The letter was beautifully composed. P expressed that he understood my perspective and apologized for attributing the blame of our break to me, that he missed me as often as I missed him, and that he genuinely wanted to try again in July, although perhaps not on the exact day we agreed upon due to a planned trip. He concluded the letter by calling me his love. He had not referred to me by that name since before everything began. He stated that this always was a break, despite the signs I interpreted from him, and that he appreciated my letter and enjoyed everything I had previously written to him. We shared a love for the same music and sang our favorite songs together during car rides, and I mentioned how much I missed that in my letter to him. He ended his letter by promising that we would sing together again. I was an emotional wreck after reading it, and I wept every other time I reread it because I could not stop myself from revisiting the hope and love I had missed so dearly. Now we reach more recent times. On the 28th, he requested to talk in person. R advised me to keep an open mind going into it, as P and I made a promise early in our relationship to notify each other if we changed our minds about the break, and I had a feeling this was what he wanted to discuss. R was rooting for us since I had shared the contents of P's letter with him. However, I was correct. He came to my house to discuss ending our relationship, stating that he keeps doing things for me and for us, but he wants to begin doing things for himself. The example he provided was something I perceive as a gesture of love when your love language is gift-giving. As his is, he mentioned that he went for a walk intending to clear his mind, but saw my Instagram post where I jokingly remarked that I would marry whoever bought me a particular plushie I spotted. So he spent the walk searching for that plushie to purchase and send to me. He initiated the conversation very confidently regarding completely breaking up and moving on because he acknowledges he is not ready for a relationship and he wants to prioritize himself rather than me or us. However, as I pressed on advocating for giving it another chance, his composure fractured and he began to cry. He allowed me to wipe his tears as I used to and held him tightly. Eventually, he hugged me back, and it took all my strength to remain composed as he clung to me as if he never wanted to let go. He needed me to be strong as he did so many times in our relationship. He deserved my strength now that I had it. He confessed that he is uncertain if ending our relationship is the right choice, and giving up the chance to try again scares him. He fears he may never find someone who shares his interests as deeply as I do or understands him in the way I do, but he is unsure of what he wants. I reassured him that we do not have to view this as a final goodbye as he initially intended, and that even if he is not prepared for July, we can still attempt to reconnect when he has healed and is ready. A significant reason we agreed on July was because we had concert tickets for early August that we planned to attend together, and since it was out of state, we intended it to be a road trip. When we planned to reconvene in July, it would serve as an opportunity to figure out the logistics for the trip. He suggested that either he purchases my ticket or that I buy his since we would not be attending together in the current context. I indicated that I needed to think it over since it was a concert by an artist we both adore, and I would need to find someone to accompany me. I must admit that I do not think I know anyone who is familiar with, let alone appreciates, the artist enough to travel to another state for the concert, and I wanted to keep hold of my ticket to give myself another opportunity to talk to P in the future. He shared that he could only envision some form of reconciliation between us, leading to a regression to the issues we faced in our previous relationship, because he is uncertain about how he would manage being in a relationship even with the therapy he plans on starting. He does not want to lead me on under the pretense of a break when he has no idea when we may actually be capable of being together again. I urged him to hold firm, assuring him that we would resume our relationship when we are both ready, and it would not be the same as before. He followed me again on Instagram, and his workplace is one I frequented even before our relationship began, so I would not be far from him when he wants to reconnect. We concluded the conversation with reluctant farewells, lingering touches reminiscent of our time together, and he drove away rapidly as I broke down on the way to my house, sobbing profusely and feeling as I did when everything first began. I texted him inquiring about what to do with the belongings we exchanged, as we were very much into gifts. My bed is strewn with plushies from him, and he responded that he wants the shirt I had that belonged to him and to keep everything else from him. I packed the shirt, a hat he gave me before we began dating, since I no longer wear hats, a few gifts I intended to give him for July, and another letter summarizing that I believe we are the right people who simply met at the wrong time and that we will try again when the timing is right. R graciously offered to deliver the box of P's belongings to him at work that evening. This was an excuse to give me a hug, as R is sweet and has been my most substantial support throughout this. P must have opened the box and read the note I left for him immediately after his shift ended, because he texted me at 2 a.m., asking if he could return the items I wanted back in person. To be honest, I wanted to decline, but I'm incredibly weak for him, so I agreed. I have been oscillating back and forth over whether this is a wise decision even now as I type this out nearly 12 hours after I consented to see him again. I decided to inquire why he wished to return my belongings in person, despite R having agreed to return them to me. P explained that he wanted one last farewell before we part ways, and I asked him why he still viewed it as a goodbye. He expressed that it is because we likely would not see each other often from here on out, and he is uncertain when we might reconvene, to which I countered that this was not a valid reason for a goodbye and suggested it could be a see you later, which he agreed he would prefer. We continued texting for 3 hours, during which he stated that his feelings for me remain strong and that he concurs it feels like we are the right people at the wrong time. I apologized for how everything unfolded, and he reciprocated my sentiments, wishing we could have been prepared now instead. We said goodnight to each other for the first time in over a month, and I finally managed to sleep for longer than just a couple of hours. Well, after all of that, it is finally the day I am pouring this all out. I intended to transfer him the concert tickets, but the website from which I purchased them does not allow transfers and is only offering the option to sell them. Now, I am not a particularly spiritual person. I engage with tarot cards, but I have not completely submerged myself in that realm nor felt a compulsion to do so. Yet I do believe in fate and that events unfold for a reason. I informed him about this development, interpreting it as a sign that we should still attend together as originally planned, but we should refrain from making any decisions right now or soon. I suggested we wait until July, as we had previously determined, but we should communicate to find a time to meet to discuss the ticket situation. My reasoning is that, considering his indecisiveness regarding his wants and feelings during this past month of limited contact, making a decision now could lead to an argument neither of us desires. Meeting in person after such a long hiatus would provide a clearer understanding of our feelings for one another compared to merely texting. He agreed, and he still wishes to return my belongings to me. Now, dear readers who have persevered alongside me through this narrative, I find myself at a crossroads concerning my next steps. I know that my love for P is deeply ingrained in my heart, as I have not lost any feelings for him throughout this ordeal. I love him as much as I did prior to all of this beginning, and even before the negative aspects began to overshadow the positive. I genuinely believe that P loves me just as deeply, and he also desires this to succeed just as much as I do. My tarot deck advises me to stop planning and simply go with the flow, as do R and another friend of mine. However, everyone else I have spoken to suggests that I am still young and should not fixate on P, advocating instead for me to move on to someone else. Perhaps this is because R and my other friend understand the depth of my connection with P better than those outside the situation, as we have both confided in them separately regarding our feelings throughout this past month, leading them to perceive a dynamic that others do not. I am uncertain, so I am reaching out to the internet, which, while biased and perhaps impartial, provides a void for me to express myself, and possibly gain some advice if anyone has managed to make it through and identifies or sees something I may be overlooking. I do have a therapy appointment scheduled for after P wishes to visit, but it is 2 days later, as that coincides with our usual appointment time and my therapist does not have earlier availability. I did ask, of course. Before you inquire, yes, this is all real, and yes, all the dates I have mentioned are real. I realize how astonishing it is that so much has transpired within a month and it continues to evolve. I suspect my therapist may require a therapist of their own as we sift through everything I need to discuss, as all we have been able to cover thus far has been the unfolding events, and we have not yet had the opportunity to delve into the underlying issues. Story 2. After I forgave my fiance for cheating on me and getting another woman pregnant, I discovered he was cheating on her too. He's now with our OBGYN, she told me. I was shocked but then laughed. I finally realized he never cared about me, just my body. Before I began communicating with this individual, my former fiance, I already had a daughter, but she was not his child. The father of my baby does not want to participate in my child's life, nor has he contributed a single penny throughout my pregnancy or childbirth. When I met this man, he immediately expressed to me that he desired to have a child. Regarding my child, I am at a loss for words because he truly cared for her. He became a father figure to my daughter, which made me very happy and proud, a feeling that endures to this day. This man did not pursue higher education simply because he did not want to. He attempted to find employment, but it did not turn out well for him. That's when I felt obligated to step in and assist him. I was a former employee at a company where most of my colleagues were close friends. I requested a favor from human resources to consider my ex-fiance for a position since I would be the one training him. I resigned because I had to move to another city for educational purposes. I was attending college at this time, and we had been in a long-distance relationship for nearly 3 years. When human resources agreed, I commenced training him. In our relationship, I consistently assumed the role of decision-maker, acting with wisdom and courage. Notably, we lived under the same roof during our first 3 years before transitioning to long distance. I was the sole financial supporter of our household. I turned a blind eye to him during those days when I was studying and working tirelessly just for us to get by, while he spent his time on our bed, playing mobile games and watching streamers around the clock. Returning to the topic of assisting him, I trained him for 1 to 2 months before he secured the job. I felt happiness for him because at last I could take pride in his accomplishments. It may sound unpleasant, but it is true that he had never done anything to make me or his family proud of him. He felt like a burden. Nevertheless, I believed in him, as my feelings for him were deep. After he had been employed at the company for 6 months, his behavior toward me began to feel suspiciously strange. There was a time when I traveled 12 hours from my city to his. He was aware of my arrival, yet he did not show up. This was unusual given our intimate relationship. He merely inquired about what I was doing there and insisted that I return home because I was tired from the journey. His behavior was unreasonable, but due to my faith in him, I complied with his wishes. How naive of me. He became narcissistic at this point. He dedicated himself to the gym. Although I supported him in this endeavor, he was the opposite regarding my appearance. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome 4 years ago, resulting in rapid weight gain, increasing my waist size from 28 inches the day I met him to 42 inches now. Despite my efforts, I was unable to halt my weight gain. I attempted Pilates, jogging, CrossFit, yoga, and calisthenics, but while my body became more toned, my weight did not decrease. Unfortunately, that did not satisfy him. He wanted me to appear muscular, as though I were a woman with significant muscles. Fast forward, I discovered that he was cheating on me on Valentine's Day. Not only that, but he also confessed that the woman was pregnant and fully aware of our 6-year relationship. My heart sank as I had poured all my effort into our relationship to ensure a future together. He pleaded for my forgiveness the day he confessed. He even traveled 12 hours to speak with me in person. I forgave him for the sake of my child and our relationship. I attempted to work things out and even communicated with the woman he had impregnated. However, as time passed, I felt that it was no longer worth the effort. After his betrayal, he became extremely jealous of his gym buddy, 27 years old, for sending me messages. These messages were benign, containing only "good morning" and "is your fiancé with you?" or "please tell your fiancé that I have already arrived at the gym." I grew angry at him for his reactions because I had never done anything to warrant such conclusions. It felt like he was shifting blame onto me for his actions. Eventually, I became exhausted by him and ended the relationship after 5 months. I let the other woman have him, as they both deserved each other. During those 5 months, the other woman was posting pictures of them together on social media, including images of them going to the obstetrician for her regular checkups, asserting that my ex-fiancé was financially responsible for everything. It seemed as though she was boasting online. It was agonizing. Imagining my fiancé with another pregnant woman was unbearable. She exhibited no remorse and had every intention of taking him from me. When my fiancé and I broke up, I informed her that she would receive the karma she deserved. Fast forward again, a month after she gave birth, the other woman sent me a message stating that my ex-fiancé, who is now her boyfriend, was cheating on her with their obstetrician. She explained that she had just found out, which is why all of her checkups were complimentary, because my ex-fiancé was having an affair with the obstetrician, 31 years old. Yes, you read that correctly. The other woman provided me with photographic evidence of conversations between my ex-fiancé and the obstetrician containing intimate images. She asked me if I knew all along and if I was aware that my ex was gay. I told her no because that was my belief all along. I failed to recognize the signs before, but they had been evident all along. He did not care about my health, he only cared about my appearance. He was not jealous of his gym buddy, he was jealous of me. I laughed while reading the other woman's message, but deep down I also felt pity for her. She informed me that they had ended their relationship after she caught him in the act. She apologized to me for disrupting my relationship and for causing me pain. Some people say to forgive and forget, others suggest to forgive but never forget. Can I choose to not forgive but forget? I want her to understand that I have buried those memories in the past, but I will never forgive her for being such a terrible person. Although I wanted to be spiteful and insulting, I also aimed to rise above her behavior.